Well, moving on to another, I don't want to say more substantive because this has been very substantive, but more substantive, maybe in a historical or philosophical sense. You mentioned narcissism earlier, and I was wondering if you might be able to tell the tale of Narcissus, because I mean, maybe not the whole thing. It's a long tale, but I think everyone knows that he drowns in a body of water because he thinks he's beautiful, but I don't think people are familiar with more of the story behind it.
No, well, right. Well, as it's told in Metamorphoses by Ovid, the Roman poet, um, he was the son of a nymph, so he was semi-divine. Um, he was also the subject of a prophecy by Tiresias, the famous blind seer who could see the future, um, who said that he prophesied a long and happy life for Narcissus, if himself he does not know. So there's this rider, and this is a very strange thing for the Greeks because know thyself was one of the injunctions over the shrine at Delphi. It's thought that was one of the first axioms of living well, to know who you are, know yourself. So it's very strange to say he's going to have a much better life if he doesn't know himself. But anyhow, then the story switches to where when he's an adolescent, 16 years old or so. He's very attractive. Lots and lots of people have been obsessed by him, tried to make out with him, and in particular the nymph Echo. Now, the interesting thing about Echo is, of course, that she only ever throws your own voice back at yourself. And so that's a slightly sinister side of the story. And I think it's extremely important because, of course, the narcissist will hear his own voice, and perhaps only his own voice. I'll use his, of course we mean his or hers. In other words, the narcissist is taken up with their own self-approbation. It's their own, what they imagine is a reflection of their own their own being pleased at themselves. And so this is Narcissus' problem. And then he's a shepherd. He's out in the country. He's by himself in the woodland glade. He comes across this very still pond, looks in, sees his reflection, and falls in love. And so he falls in love with his own reflection. And that's of a piece with only hearing echo. It's the same kind of self-obsession. And as a result, he can't leave the reflection alone. It's in some respects the perfect match, because if he moves towards the smooth surface of the water, the reflection moves towards him. It's rather like a parody of a relationship. But it's eventually his death. He pines away and dies. And so Tiresias' prophecy turns out to have been true. By knowing himself, he killed himself. Another curious feature of the myth is that there's no body left. There's nothing left except where he dies, the little flower, the small narcissus, like a small daffodil. It's called a jonquil, which is interesting because it's a flower that bows its head towards the ground. Yes, so it's I don't know whether that's a significant feature of the myth, but it's interesting that that's where he ends up. That we're humbled, I think, by his failed career, his failed love affair, his failure to engage with other people, his failure as a social being, and all out of an excess of self-love. So that's the story of Narcissus, and I think it's very, like all Greek myths. It's got a sinister side, and it's got a lot of psychological insight in it. I think in particular the fact that he only hears echo. That's the only voice he ever hears, and it's his own voice, is very important to the phenomenon of narcissism, because I think that's true of the narcissist. The voice that matters to him is his own voice. So when people ask whether Trump has a narcissistic personality disorder, I think the diagnostic I would use is, well, does he ever listen to other people? As far as I understand it, no. And does he have an enormously conceited self-image? Yes. So he's well on the spectrum. I know that diagnosticians from the psychologists in the USA have been a little bit cautious about saying that he's on that spectrum, but it seems to me there's no doubt about it. So I think it's a very interesting myth, which we can apply to people we know. I would go on at length about Boris Johnson, but I think Johnson may be nearer to being vague. Both him and Trump, both he and Trump, lash out if they face actual criticism. The actual voice of other people is profoundly irritating to them. It's as if they want to hide away from social scrutiny, from any kind of scrutiny. And I think that's more to do with not so much delusions of self-worth, but the fear of inadequacy that you mentioned earlier. It's anything that suggests less than perfect adulation from other people is uncomfortable and starts to chip away at their carefully constructed sense of who they are. So that's Narcissus though, and I think he's amongst us.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for recounting the tale. And I just parenthetically, do you know if our word echo comes from the name of Ovid's Echo?
I don't know that. I know that our word Narcissus for the flower comes from the myth.
Okay, that's very neat.
It might easily come from, that might be the first, but I'd have to look at the Oxford Dictionary to see, Dictionary of Etymology. I can answer that for you after we finish this.
Sure. Yeah. It's so clear why mirrors are such a great theme in books, in films, in poetry. As you were talking, I was thinking about this poem, For Once Then Something, by Robert Frost. Is that one that happens to ring a bell for you?
I know a fair amount of Frost poetry, but I can't place that offhand. Can we quote it?
Yeah, I could read it. I don't know. If we want to get into poetry, I mean, you quote Shakespeare's Sonnet 62 in your book, and that's another one worth talking about. But in the Robert Frost poem, I can recount what happens. I don't have it right in front of me, but he is constantly looking in wells. I guess people taunt him for it, looking for his reflection, and then a pebble or a drop of water or something falls into the well, revealing that there's something at the bottom of the well. And the poem is called For Once Then Something, and the poem ends with he finally sees that there's something under the reflection, and he says, "Oh, for once, then there's actually something real there." So,
right, that's interesting. So, is his thought that what's really under the reflection is, in a sense, his own self, the self that he's disguised with those series of images of himself. Or is it something else, other facts, other people, other society?
It's been a long time since I read it closely, but yes, I think there was something to do with as I recall, the superficiality of the exterior, and that there is something much deeper within us than what meets the eye.
Yes. Well, of course, it is true that Narcissus, even in the myth, it's superficial in the sense that he can't touch the image he falls in love with. He can't hear it. It's just echo when he uses that Zen voice. So, as it were, he is condemned to a world of illusion, or a world of mere appearance. He's not getting at even himself, let alone another person. So I think Frost must be picking up that as something that's needed, something to go beyond the superficial, the world of the mirror.